gonna try and keep this short and sweet, but we'll see if I succeed. Hello, my lovely friends, it's Margaret. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be talking about the best books that I have read in 2024 so far. I figured why not start making my best books of 2024 list now, rather than waiting to the last minute and then having to, you know, scramble. So these are going to be my favorite books that I have read so far this year in 2024. Some of these I have talked about in vlogs, some of these I haven't. If there is another video associated with it, I will go ahead and link it down below in the description box for you. We are going to start out with my favorite of the nonfiction that I have read so far this year, and that is Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement by Angela Y. Davis. If you do not know who Angela Davis is, she is an activist that has been working for decades with different social liberation movements, started with the Black Panthers, and this is a series of speeches and essays that she has written looking at the whole of her time as an activist. I have been meaning to get to this for a very, very long time. I ended up reading it in February, and it was like, I know, it was like a reset for my brain. There is a lot in here that really Angela Davis was able to put words to things that I have been thinking about in the last 9 months at this point, especially when it comes to the sustainability of activism and social movements, and then what it looks like to do activism or do a social movement online. The way she looks at things is a very kind of long-reaching view. She is looking at the things that she has seen play out over decades. It was a reminder that I really needed at the time that I picked this up and started reading it. If you have a chance to read this, you need to pick it up. You need to check it out. You need to listen to what she is saying. She is a brilliant speaker, and I highly recommend this book. Next, we will be talking about Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is contender for #1 book that I have read this year. Will it probably end up getting dethroned? Knowing what books are coming out this year, probably. Like there's just a bias there. That author wins every year. But so far, this is one of the two that are like clearly top of the crop. And that is impressive considering that this is a novella. We are in a secondary fantasy world here, and we are dealing with a main character who, when she was a teenager, like in her, I want to say in her late teens, she watched as her mother and brother were eaten by a manticore. She ends up with a whole lot of survivor's guilt because of that, and a lot of anger and hatred of these creatures because of that. And they are creatures that are known to, typically they stay out in the wild, but they will come in and they will menace people in towns and treat them as kind of like their food supply. She ends up joining the royal mews and becoming a rooker. In this world, we have rocks, which are giant birds, and they are the manticore's natural predator, and she ends up becoming the handler for one of these birds. This was just so well done and so well paced, and like the way that Fonda Lee was able to build like two simultaneous stories. We are following the story between Esther and her rock, and we're also following the story between Esther and her fellow rookers. So we're watching these two kind of parallel narratives of these relationships building and being strengthened. It is almost like, I would say, a slice of life type little fantasy world, and I just, like, this left me so beautifully satisfied, but also desperate for more from this world. Looking at these, I probably should have put them in order by genre or something, but they're in the order that I grabbed them off my shelves when I was looking at the list. Next book that we are going to be talking about is Miss Percy's Travel Guide to, oh god, take #2. The next book we are going to be talking about is Miss Percy's Travel Guide to Welsh Moors and Feral Dragons. This is the second book in the Merce. This is the second book in the Miss Percy series, and when I tell you I love this series, this is like if Jane Austen and I guess we could go with How to Train Your Dragon. So this is like if Jane Austen and How to Train Your Dragon had a baby. That's what this book is like. We are following an older protagonist in here, and I absolutely adore all of the different threads we have going on in this relationship. This is the first book is a late coming of age type story where we have this woman that she gets an inheritance, and the inheritance is a little bit weird. Like there's like really weird eclectic things and notes and all this strange paraphernalia. She's like, why is he giving this to me? Why wasn't it just thrown out? And there's like this giant rock, and she's like, why did he give me a rock? Real rocks this time, not the bird rocks. She ends up like giving the egg to the vicar to kind of study. He's going to like show it to the kids, and then he's like, hey, you need to come over because the rock just hatched. That's not a spoiler, by the way. There is literally a baby dragon and an egg on each one of these covers. The entire first book is just her going, I'm not going to call it a dragon. I'm not going to call it a dragon. This is not a dragon. These aren't real. What do I do with this giant baby lizard that's breathing fire? It is absolutely hilarious. I love the little romance that we have going on between Miss Percy and another character that we meet in this. It's like one of my favorite, it's not like they've known each other before, but like one of my favorite starts to a romance just because it's so funny and it's so sketchy. Like she is being sketchy when this whole thing kicks off between the two of them, and it just was like, Oh my god, it's just peak comedy. If this were not a fantasy, it would be a rom-com. I absolutely adore this. There is a lot of complicated stuff going on here with her. Like I said, this is an older protagonist kind of coming of age novel. She has been repressing herself and who she is for many, many years versus the caretaker for her ailing father and then as the caretaker for her sister's children. We're seeing her in like her late 30s for the first time going, what do I want out of my life and how do I make it happen? And I love that. I will say we have a very voicey narrator. It's very much in the style of Jane Austen, but with a little bit of like Shakespeare's fourth wall break thrown in. So if that's not your cup of tea, you're probably not gonna like this book, but I absolutely adore it. After that, we have Roleplaying by Kathy Yardley. This is another one that has two older protagonists, and I absolutely adore it. This is what people would call a reverse Grumpy Sunshine romance, but like, Grumpy Sunshine isn't attached to the gender. In this case, the girl is the Grinch, and she is an entire mood. I love Maggie. She is amazing. I want to be her when I grow up because she is so confident and like knows who she is and takes no one's shit, and I absolutely adore it. And you probably want to know about what this book is about. I'm sorry. We're following two people that end up meeting through an online gaming guild that she gets hooked into. She gets the information from a friend's college-age student. And so she thinks that Aiden is like a 20-something college kid. And then she like is continually like making jokes about how old she is. So he thinks she's someone's grandma. It's slow burn, so just know that going in. But they spend like the first third to half of the novel not even knowing who they're talking to. They end up building like this beautiful, beautiful friendship through their texts on the gaming guild. And I loved everything about this. Like, this was everything I wanted, everything I needed. I'm so glad I got to it finally. I've had this for over a year, and I'm just so glad that I've had this since I've had my Kindle, which is way longer than that. I'm so glad that I finally picked this up because it made my entire year. Probably number 3 if we were to rank these. I didn't rank them though because I didn't think that far ahead. We're too early in the year for me to be serious enough for me to do rankings. The next book we're going to be talking about is The Shadow Sister by Lily Mead. This is the book that I chose. Like, if I cried about over books, this is the book I would have cried over because like that ending. This is a YA mystery thriller. So we're following Casey as she and her family are trying to find her sister Sutton. Sutton went missing a week ago, so she is helping her mom and her dad kind of project this perfect happy family image as they are trying to convince people that Sutton is worth the effort to search for. This is a fact that we know about the media, that when a non-white child goes missing, the media is a lot less likely to focus on them. And so her mom is trying to combat that by putting forward this very perfect happy family image and convince people that her sister was a perfect happy angel. And Casey has some thoughts about the idea that her sister is perfect, namely that Sutton is not and Sutton is the worst, but she also loves her sister and wants her to be found. It's such a wonderful, complicated exploration of Casey's feelings in the early bits of this novel, and then very quickly, like, this is the entire like thing that sets off what's going on with the rest of the book. Sutton is found, but like Sutton comes back, and there is something about her that Casey is like, this is off. I think something is wrong here. I think you've got something is going on, and I'm gonna figure it out. And the book is just Casey trying to figure out what the heck is going on with her sister. This is a beautiful novel about complicated family relationships. It's also a novel about family resilience. I can't tell you like details because spoilers, but the way that the family resilience theme and the family history come together at the end of this novel just is it's so powerful. It was such a wonderful, powerful moment, and I, again, almost cried, and there's like 4 books that have done that. After that, I finally read the rest of the Howl's Moving Castle books, and I have to say I absolutely adored House of Many Ways by Diana Wynne Jones. Here's the deal. I gave all of these books 5 stars because I love Sophie and Howl. There is stuff in the second book that makes me go like, if you want to just skip that one, you probably can. There is just a lot of a white author trying to make her books more diverse and not quite nailing it. There's so many like stereotypes and tropes in here, and you had to have had, like, this was written in the 1990s, you had to have had the information about this. I really enjoyed this one. I felt like this was the one that really captured the magic of the first book. I never go into a sequel expecting it to be exactly like the first book or to give me the same feelings as the first book, but the way that this one is, like what we're dealing with and what we're going through in this one, it had a lot of that magic with the characters and the character relationships, and it didn't have any of the weird racism that made me kind of go, ugh. I really appreciated it. I just had such a fun time. The fact that we get to see Sophie kind of coming into her own and like really get to, like, we didn't really get to see her the way I would have liked to see her in book 2, but we get to see her a little bit more there. Hal is also in here causing trouble, and we're following a completely different set of characters. Like, the main character is a completely different person. She is a young girl who is gone to watch, I think it's her uncle's house, while he is getting he's sick and something like that. I don't entirely, I think, but that's a spoiler. But basically he gets taken away to go have medical treatment done, and someone needs to watch the house, and it ends up being our main character, only she finds out that, like, this house is really weird and doors don't always lead where you think they will. Like, if you make the wrong turn, you end up in a completely different part of the house, or maybe even like somewhere that's not the house. I think that's the real thing that really captured like the essence of the first book, where we had that like moving door with the moving castle. This has like the way that like the different ways that you can go through the house. And so I think that that's really what sold this book to me as just almost as good as the first one. The first one is still the best one. If you want to stop there, you can. After that, we're going to talk about a book by one of my new favorite authors, and that is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I read this between the wait for Don't Fear the Reaper and Angel of Indian Lake, because I was like, I want to read Angel of Indian Lake, but it's not out yet. How dare it not be there when I finally read the sequel. I read My Heart is a Chainsaw a couple of years ago, absolutely fell in love with it, fell in love with that entire world and those characters and that trilogy. I knew I wanted to read more of Stephen Graham Jones' work, and I had my eye on this one for a very long time, and so I decided, like, why not? This is the time. This is an adult horror, and I could try to summarize the plot of this book, but I cannot put it any better than it's already put in the front of the book. So I'm just going to read this to you. The Only Good Indians follows 4 American Indian men after a disturbing event from their youth puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives. Tracked by an entity bent on retribution, these childhood friends are helpless as the culture and traditions they left behind catch up to them in a violent, vengeful way. This is almost like, I guess you could say, a series of short stories that build on each other. Like, there is a central plot going through all 4 of these men's stories and the way that they play out, and each one progressively kind of gets longer, and we sit more with what's going on with them. And I absolutely like the way that all of that goes and comes together at the very end. One of the most powerful endings I have ever read in a book, like horror, it does not matter, one of the most powerful endings I have read at the end of the book. There are going to be people who get it, who understand what that was about. There are going to be people who read this and they're going to see some of the decisions and some of the things that these characters make, some of the choices that these characters make, and be mad about some of what, but there is a point to it, if that makes sense. So definitely, like, look up reviews by Indigenous reviewers, because I know there was I will never stop being mad about the fact that when this first came out, it was sent almost exclusively to white reviewers who were not going to understand what was happening in this book. Send books to the reviewers that the books are about. This is a book that is about retribution, like I said. This is a book about nature taking revenge. This is a book about female revenge. That's part of what is going on here. This is also a book that is very much about how our choices have lasting consequences, and how they can, literally choices are coming back to haunt these 4 main characters. The eeriness of that, the weirdness going on. The one thing I will warn, because I know there are a lot of people who cannot do pet death. It's a rough couple of scenes. So just know that. If that is something you need to steer away from it. The other thing I do want to say is, like, if you've read his short stories and feel like there's a lot that he's packing in them and that they're too intense, definitely check out his novels, because his novels kind of spread that intensity out a little bit, and they give you moments to breathe that you don't necessarily have in a short story. And the final book that we're going to be talking about in this video that might make it onto my favorite books of 2024. I make no guarantees for just about most of these, but the final book that we're going to be talking about is Toown by Frederick Bachman. This is following a hockey town, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there is trigger warnings for rape on page. This story is about the fallout in this small hockey town of what happens when a hockey player's victim comes out and says, hey, this player raped me. I was having a time at the beginning with some of the main characters because there are a ton of point of views. Like, we're in just about everybody's head at some point or another in this novel. We are in the girl's head, we are in the parent's head, we are in the perpetrator's head, we are in his friend's head. There is just, like, the way that Frederick Bachman just takes all of these points and just puts you in these people's lives, puts you in their thought processes. It just feels so very real, the way that he is walking you through and taking you through the way people are processing that this happened and taking you through why they make the decisions that they make. He's never making apologies, he's never making excuses for what happened, but he very much digs into why these people are deciding the things that they decide, and I'm very interested to continue on with the rest of this series. If you have thought about picking this book at any point in time, I highly encourage you to go ahead and do so because it's so good. Those are the best books that I have read in 2024, and I would love to know, like, what are some of the best books that you have read so far this year? What are, like, the contenders for best book of the year for you? If you want to know a little bit more about how my reading year has gone, I will have the mid-year freakout tag that I did up here where I talk best, worst, all of the in-between right up here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you like the vibes, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!